Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever it might be, wherever you might be. We're here. It's Michael Hobbs inviting you to enjoy another informative, engaging, and I would say enlightening episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. I'm excited to have our guest today. Darren, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks,
I've
bro.
been a fan for a long time, so.
I appreciate it. It's very thoughtful of you. And you know, something that's thoughtful of you, my friends listening, that is, why don't you go ahead and not only subscribe, but like this episode, one, because it's Darren, because he'll feel better. You can see him smiling right now. But more importantly, your signaling of subscribing actually informs the networks that this is of value and that they will make the effort to assist you in getting this out to others that can also enjoy and appreciate the opportunity just to hear what's going on in the professional journeys of our peers, what we can learn from that, and how we can all make a little bit of a bigger dent, if you will, in the world. So thank you for doing that. And with that, Darren, inquiring minds are asking, were you born this way, or how did you come to get involved in the appraisal and valuation industry?
Wow. That's a great question. I'd like to think I was born that way. I was not born into the industry by any stretch. Quite the
Most
opposite.
of us are not, Darren.
No,
Most of us are not.
I, like so many others during high school, had some evening and summer jobs that provided some extra spending money, and mine was moving furniture. I wasn't lucky enough to be a lifeguard at the pool or a cashier at the grocery store. I went and moved people's furniture and loved it. Actually, it was a great challenge. It was fun.
Yes.
And then I went off to school. Went to Columbia College in Chicago to study.
Great program. For those who don't know, were you one of the creative types, huh?
I was. I've been a drummer all my life. So I went to study music and figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. But I knew that playing music and being a drummer was incredibly important. It had been through that period. I had played not only in the school bands and orchestras and jazz bands and so on and so forth, but I had some, rock bands that I played with my close friends, and we were pretty good. So I went to Columbia and figured out very quickly that school was tough and expensive, and I didn't like being poor. So I decided after a semester to go back to work. And what did I know? I went back and to work for a moving company and did that for a while.
Hey, but Darren, do you ever look back on it and say, had I just given the band, just like 12 more months, like 18 more months, and people would know me as the drummer in Pearl Jam. Did it ever cross your mind that you left too soon?
Sort of, but not really, because the guys that I was playing with at the time all went away to school. Right, one went to IU, one went to University of Illinois, one went to Southern. So we were all going off to school. We weren't one of those bands that were destined to, get in the house and live with each other and write the next,
got it,
platinum album. So for me, music was more of a passion around how do I incorporate this into the rest of my life, right? How do I maybe get a job, maybe in a band, and we'll see where it goes. But in reality, I had this saying early on that for every Tommy Lee from Motley Crue, I'm dating myself a bit here, but for every Tommy Lee in Motley Crue, there's 12 bazillion other drummers who are just trying to crack the code and make it. And I knew that the chances of being that one in so many others is a far shot. So I needed to do something else. And after I went to school and didn't follow that path, I got very comfortable in just going to work and making a living. I eventually got a CDL when I was
nice.
19. And to connect that back to the music, I moved out to California. I had an uncle who had lived out there for a while, and I thought, you know what? I can give it another shot. I'll go to school out in Southern California. I'll play some music. I'll get into a rock band.
Nice.
And that was about a year's worth of that. And that was tough, being a Midwest kid in a foreign place, kind of all alone. So I ended up going back to work. This is kind of a recurring theme here. Came back home after not quite a year, and I went full time into the moving business. I bought some trucks, hired some guys, and had a nice little business going for about 10 years or so. So during this time, I never gave up on my music. I had played in a couple of different bands, but there was one particular band that I was playing with pretty regularly. The guitar player and singer happened to be a mortgage broker.
No way.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
he didn't like the fact that I was on the road all the time. I was gone, a lot. And he wanted to practice. He wanted to play more. And he told me about a buddy of his who had this job that was so easy. Anybody could do it. And it paid like money was just falling out of the sky. And I said, what perchance is that? He said, he's a real estate appraiser.
Oh, what year is this, man?
And this is 1997.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. That is funny.
So it's 1997, 1998, somewhere right in there. And I'm like, okay. I needed a challenge because I knew that driving a truck, moving furniture, owning a small business were all good and great things for me at the time. But for my future and for my back, I was going to need to use my brain more than my brawn. So I went down this path with my new Dell computer that I paid, I don't know, some ridiculous amount for back in 97 to do some research on the web around becoming an appraiser. So I found out that there was a handful of classes that you had to take and that you could become a licensed appraiser in the state of Illinois, which is where I lived at the time. And I still do it.
You left Southern California.
So I went to California and then came back. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I had been back a few years and I was living here and decided to dive into this appraisal thing. So it wasn't too much. Back then you could take the 3 classes in a package from, I'm going to try to remember the name and some people will remember this, the Real Estate Education Company.
I think so. Who are your instructors?
Oh man, I'm going to botch his last name and I can't remember right now. It was Hal
London.
Thank you. Hal London was one of the best human beings I had ever met in my life. I thought I met Liberace in person, but he was so much more than that. Man,
oh my gosh.
The dude was
a great description of that man.
Isn't it?
It is.
God bless him. He planted a seed very early on with me. It was one of our first classes, and he talked about the appraisal industry because he owned a bunch of stuff. He was an investor. He owned an appraisal company. And one of the first things that he said was, your goal here after you leave this class is to figure out how you make money while you sleep.
Yes.
And then he paused and just sat there and everybody went, oh, what does that mean? And then he got into, here's all the things that I do, and here's what I'm going to do to allow you to follow that path or your own path.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that. I took that class on Michigan Avenue in Chicago.
That's right. I forgot that's where it was. Holy cow.
Yeah.
That's very unusual, Darren. I'm just reminiscing. We've had almost no guests that are from Chicago, even though I'm not from here, but it's where I live. Bringing back, putting out some way back memories there. That's,
man.
Pulling out that machine. So, wow, you went down into real estate education.
The Real Estate Education Company on Michigan Avenue, just south of Lake Street, for those who are putting the
late great.
The late great, absolutely. So I got that paper, as it were, went and took my test, got my license. So my first client was my guitar player, who was a mortgage broker, who tossed over a couple of, pretty easy appraisals. They were single families. there was a guy in the neighborhood where I lived at the time who knew some of my family members, who was also an appraiser. He gave me some work to do. There was another appraiser shop or across town so I picked up work, and I was able to very quickly, I'd say in under a year, I was able to hand off. I sold my trucking business, my moving business, to my partner, and moved full-time into real estate appraisal.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I set up my rig at my house. I had my desk all spread out and my fax machine, the whole 9 yards. Had my Sony digital camera with the floppy disk.
Nice. Love it.
And for the floppy disk film. You remember those?
Oh, I do, actually. I remember that. That was like blue and gray, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I remember it was right. Yeah, it was right after. I remember getting that because one of the first appraisals that I reviewed to learn, somebody had still taped down some film, like pictures on paper for the appraisal, right? It was a long form written appraisal with actual pictures of the house and the street on it. Yes. So I was very excited to be in the digital realm and learning this software that was available now. Day one, I think, was the first package that I used.
Day one? That sounds about right.
Yeah, some fun stuff. So where was I going with all this? I was building my own little business. I just had my business and sold it, trying to build another one. And I met a lot of people, got more involved with, all sorts of different mortgage types. And along the way, somehow I got an order from one of the big lenders, and I'm having a moment here with which one they were, but they ended up doing a lot of foreclosure appraisals, REOs.
Oh, really?
And it came across my desk. I had seen them before, and I figured out that if I could get the REO appraisals, right? REOs are real estate owned. They're foreclosed appraisals. The bank owns them. So they're empty houses. So if I could stack up 3, 4, 5 of those at a time, I could just go out, through a neighborhood, a part of town, and knock those out pretty quickly. And then come back, write them up, and rinse and repeat. And then you wouldn't have to wait and feel the pressure of, of a sale or a refi and trying to hit a number. I mean, this is in the, this is the early 2000s now, 2002, 3, 4, 5 in there before the market crashed. Everything's going crazy with values. And I just figured if I could have a different side of it, I could have revenue from regular, purchase mortgages as well as refi mortgages. And then on the other side, have that income stream from foreclosures. Well, that worked out well for quite a while. And then the market crashed in 2008, right?
Yep, the crash.
And if you remember, everything froze. So there was a point in mid to late August into September. That's when Lehman went down. There was no work for appraisers. Everything was frozen. All the markets were frozen. Even the foreclosures had a moratorium because nobody knew what was going on. All the heads of banks and even the car companies were all in DC sitting at the table trying to hash it all out, right? So this is October 2008. And I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? My wife and I, mostly my wife, had just had a baby. And
I'm saying she did all the work on that one, my friend.
So August of 2008, we just had our first child, and the market comes crashing down around October, November, and I'm sitting there going, oh man, what am I going to do here? There's no real work to be done. I'm dipping into my savings now because what's gonna happen? And so I start perusing the interwebs for jobs to see what's out there. There's not a whole lot, but there happened to be a valuation role for Fannie Mae, based in Dallas.
Okay.
They saw the need approaching very quickly, the tsunami, as it were, that was going to be the foreclosures coming from the sand states, and they needed to start building out what was a very nascent group at that point, their REO valuation group, which is based out of the Dallas office. So I put in my resume, had an interview, and ended up getting a contract role. So it was a 6-month contract, but I said, what do I have to lose? Packed up the house, the wife, the new child, and we moved to Dallas.
That's amazing.
I ended up being hired full-time, as many of us were coming through that route.
Yeah.
And I ended up spending just under 7 years at Fannie Mae.
For you?
Yeah. So Fannie Mae is, so I got there in January 2009, and wow, what a,
Man, you were there early too. Things weren't completely falling apart yet.
no. And the funny part is, the team at that point was maybe 10 people. There was a core of 5 or 6 who had been there that just handled the REO valuations that came through, right? And as they started to pick up in 2008, they started building the team. So they added a few more people. So I was with this cohort, if you will, of, I think there was 6 of us that came in. And then there was a group about a month later. And then a month later, there was another group.
Yep.
Ultimately, that group got into a couple hundred people that were doing valuation, quality control, vendor management, everything under the sun, and all from scratch.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was an incredible group of people that I was around. Some of the smartest individuals I had ever met, valuation or otherwise. Just consummate professionals, some people who just knew how to do what they were there to do. And then outside of the valuation space, there were data analytics specialists. There were people who wrote crazy code and software, and auditors and accountants and finance people. Just, I got to meet a lot of good people. So that was an excellent time to kind of refocus and understand that, okay, I'm no longer the appraiser that I was just months ago running my own shop, right?
Yeah.
I am now a corporate cube dweller, as it were.
Yep.
Who is assigned to my own space, or my region, as it were, in Illinois. So I was charged with reviewing the appraisals that came in from Illinois. And as we grew, we knew that we needed other services within the valuation group. We needed internal people to review the work of the review appraisers inside. So I like to think of it, it's kind of negative, but we were like the internal investigation group, or if you will.
Oh, internal affairs, I think is what they call it.
IA, internal affairs.
Yeah.
It was a new
group. Those people.
We were not the fun group.
Yeah.
We got to review the reviews, and it was me and one other guy who were the first ones to do that. And that group ended up growing pretty big. As I said, the overall valuation group grew into a few hundred people over the course of a couple of years. I mean, it was so fast. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was. It just ramped up so quickly.
And a few years into it, I had an opportunity to jump over from valuation into the sales group, all under the same umbrella, all under the same, executive leadership team. But what I wanted to do is challenge myself a little more outside of valuation. There was opportunities to get into vendor management, data analytics. And Fannie Mae also had a program that paid for school if you were doing something.
That's great.
So I went back to school, finished up my bachelor's degree, got an MBA, and really used that time to figure out kind of my new path. So within Fannie Mae, getting the opportunity to go back to school, but also using that knowledge in real time to learn new skills. So I started, building really cool stuff in Excel and doing data analytics on thousands of vendors, right? So in the in the REO space, when a property comes in, you have all these different folks who are doing, who have to manage the property in different ways. So you have the lawyers, you have the realtors, of course, you have the appraisers, you have the grass cutters, you have the people who board it up, the fence folks, the roofers.
So many people.
Everything, right? And our challenge was to figure out, at the height of this thing, when a property came in, who was the next best person to get the assignment from all of those different vendors, right? So if you had a property come in to 123 Main Street in, Tallahassee, Florida, we had to figure out in Tallahassee and at MSA, who was the next best person to get that. So we had to create scorecards. We had to figure out capacity models. We had to, and I say this was a big team effort. I was so lucky to be surrounded by such incredibly smart individuals who knew data and data analytics far better than I did. And I was able to steal little bits of knowledge and code and write some cool stuff myself that I ended up being able to use to understand how we could choose our vendors, how we can automate the choices. And I bring up automation because at the peak of the REO crisis, as it were, there was something like 1,300 REOs coming into Fannie Mae a day.
Was that the case?
Yes.
Wow.
So it started, it felt like a tsunami. It started in the sand states out west, California, Arizona, Nevada, right? And it moved across the United States over the course of, a year and a half or 2 years. And we got to practice, as it were, with California. And then as it moved across to the other states and finally over to, to the East Coast, we had to build all these really cool tools and models and everything else to manage it. The reason we had to do all this, Fannie Mae was charged with, really managing the loss, the risk mitigation on the loss of these properties. These properties are now, Fannie Mae being a pseudo government entity, we're saving taxpayer dollars. That was the goal, right? So even though there was already a loss on the property, what could we do to manage that loss as much as we could, and make decisions that were best for that particular market, right? Did we just flip it, put it up for sale, and sell it off to investors? Did we sell it at the courthouse steps through the auction process? Or did we spend tens of thousands of dollars doing a full rehab in order to put it back into the market and help enhance that market? So there were so many decisions that had to be made that we just had to create lots of different ways to think about the best way to choose those people that were doing the work and to choose the right path for each of these properties. So that's a lot, right? Fannie Mae, 7 years, tons of stuff, man, awesome people. And finally the wave started to slow down a little bit. Caught our breaths a little bit. And I started getting bored.
That happens.
And I had a recruiter reach out to me, and there was another nascent group at a large bank that was looking to build out a third-party risk management team. And they liked what they saw on LinkedIn or my resume or whatever, wherever they found me. And I thought it was time. I had since moved back to Chicago. I was working remote, and there's just this feel in the air that Fannie Mae was going to start to, as fast as they grew, they were going to start to shrink a little bit. And I was looking for a different challenge. So I took that challenge and went to work for a large bank, HSBC. And I was in a really cool group, again, with some smart people doing some cool stuff, figuring out how to manage and really dial in the data and governance around third-party risk management. for the bank's third-party relationships. That didn't last too long, and I'll tell you why.
Really?
The bureaucracy was just incredible. To get anything done, it was such a large institution that it just took months and months to
Banking.
get anything done. So
Banking.
I had an opportunity to get back into valuation proper as a chief appraiser of an AMC in Chicago. So
really, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so I took that opportunity. I said, you know what, the big
I apologize for my ignorance. I didn't realize there were AMCs in Chicago. Who was that back then?
First Look Appraisals.
Oh, yeah, First Look. You know what? That's right. As soon as you said it, I'm like, oh, take back my words. I misspoke. Yeah, I remember we had someone working for us who left to go work over there. That's how I found out they existed. And then they were gone.
Yeah, after a number of years. So I was there for a few years. Another great opportunity. Worked with some smart folks. And but then the opportunity to take a CFO role. What I failed to mention was back at Fannie when I was working on my getting done with my degrees, I kept going after my MBA and got a CPA certification.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, so I also became a CPA at that time and started doing some side work, some advisory for my friends who own businesses, helping them with their books, giving them, some tax advice and doing some spreadsheet work and QuickBooks and so on and so forth. Yeah. So a few years later, there was an opportunity for me to become the CFO of a company, a really cool company making living walls. If you've ever seen one, they're just absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, it's basically grass that grows vertical.
Grass and plants and just living material that grows on a vertical plane. It doesn't grow, well, they all grow vertically, right?
Yep.
But it was a commercial construction company, basically. Oh, okay. So what we did is went in and created these beautiful specimens. I mean, they were just incredible shows of talent and horticulture beauty that was on a vertical plane in commercial settings, hospitals, schools, what else? Office buildings, throughout the United States. And that was fantastic. I thought I found my dream job. I did find my dream job. It was absolutely incredible. And then COVID hit. So I had a second time in my professional career where everything came to a halt very quickly and had to figure out what was going on. Unfortunately, at the beginning of COVID, the founder and CEO of our company had passed away. So I took over the reins of that company and we were growing like gangbusters, but our primary clients were commercial real estate entities.
Oh, I see.
So again, we're in a situation where the work essentially dried up because commercial real estate had come to a halt. At least what they were going to do as far as any upgrades or, especially purchasing something as big as a living wall versus just putting up some other sort of material. So we got towards the end of 2020 and that company sadly wound down.
Oh, too bad.
And sold off the assets. And that's where I had, I was at a crossroads. Do I search for a job, or do I focus on all these tools and all this stuff that I have built up in my my toolbox and go out and do it for a living? So I chose the latter and decided that if I could be a CFO, I could do operational stuff, I could do data analytics, if I could crunch numbers, understand valuation, understand logic, I could do that for all sorts of small businesses. So that's what I did. I decided to be a small business CFO, small business CPA, and just work with all different folks who were on their journey to create something bigger and better.
So this is fantastic because it's an interesting story that many people can relate to, being in and around, seizing opportunities, having some opportunities maybe seize them. You mentioned how you had been working in a completely unrelated industry. And then because someone said, how did you refer to it? There was money falling off of trees back in the late 90s. It sounds wonderful, like an apple orchard, I guess.
Kinda.
You go and take some courses and then you went out and started cultivating business. Were you self-taught or, back then, was it all in like microfiche? Like, how did you develop some familiarity and some experience?
80% of all businesses fail within 5 years, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. With so many roles and responsibilities that must be managed and have nothing to do with appraisal reports, is it any surprise that it's hard to keep up? Much less having a sense of peace, stability, and profitability that comes from growing your business? Given all of this, you might already be thinking about exiting your business one day. Don't miss the limited opportunity to work with Michael, a real estate expert and professional coach. He has worked with more than 300 owners and entrepreneurs to find their highest and best use by solving problems that reach their most important goals. Compress decades of learning into days by working with Michael. Michael is famous in real estate and business coaching. With his help, you can accelerate your growth, increase your quality of life, and earn more money, all while ultimately doing less. Michael helps you not just grow your business, but also find new purpose in it and in your life. If you're ready to take control instead of being controlled, contact him on LinkedIn or email him at michaelh@paru.com.
It was, I'm trying to think how I literally finished my first appraisal by looking at, I guess I had a mentor in a sense. It was another appraiser that I had met, but he wasn't a mentor in the true sense. Not like we have today or in the last 15 years where it's a necessary component of becoming licensed. Back then, literally, you took the test, they gave you a license, you could go write an appraisal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was that simple. And frankly, 5 years before that, so that was 99 when I finally got licensed, but it was only 5-6 years before that when FIREA came about and the licensing was mandatory. Before that, anybody could write an appraisal, right?
Yes, that is definitely the case.
So, my mentorship came from meeting an appraiser. He gave me a handful of appraisals that I just gleaned over and copied a bunch of stuff that I thought sounded important. There was a lot of boilerplate now that I look back in hindsight that, like the market area stuff that a lot of people ended up using, east and west and north and south. And so copied that, found some other things that were in those reports that I could put into my templates because I was using software at the time.
Yes.
Where it really, I started working with this other gentleman who was a true review appraiser. And that's where I gathered, and he became more of a true mentor where he was reviewing my work and giving me, solid feedback. And luckily for me, that was in the first few months of getting my license. So it wasn't like I was Wild Westing it for years and then suddenly got some training. It was really,
I mean, for people that maybe newer in the profession or not in the profession and don't really understand what it was like 25 years ago, which in some cases may for you feel like or seem just not too many days ago, and for others you're like, oh my gosh, that's a long period of time. What was it like to get to work with someone, in this case, who was a review appraiser, kind of, paint the picture of what the actual environment was like in terms of like where you were, where this person was, how you learned and shared.
So this particular, let me kind of set the scene by saying, as I mentioned earlier, I had set up my own office in my house, right? I had got a fax machine and got an extra phone line back in the day when we got a second phone line coming into the house.
Oh yeah.
And I had the orders that were coming in from my guitar player buddy, but also he had introduced me to a couple other mortgage brokers who were starting to send some stuff over. And then this family friend who owned he was a realtor. He was also an appraiser, and he did a number of different things. He's also a big data analytics guy. And he invited me to come over. He had some split fee work that he would do. And I remember him saying that this particular, it's a drive-by. I think was it a 2055 maybe?
Yep, that's what they were.
Paid $175, and if I drove 35 miles down the road, he would do I don't even think it was a 50-50 split. So it would pay me, under $100, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. How many of these can I do? He's like, we get a few in a day to 10 a day. And back then it was like, okay, if I can stack these dollars up and learn and sit next to this gentleman, I can really start to, get a feel for how to make myself better. And then I can go out and charge more. I can go charge $250 for my 1004 and not split it with anyone. So what does the scene look like? He had a kind of a storefront in a little, kind of a little strip mall, suburban type strip mall thing. And he had a couple of desks laid out kind of long. His nephew sat in one corner. I sat on one, side of the table, and then he was down in an office around the corner. And I can't remember the software we were using. It might have been Day One again or something like that. And I'd work on one computer, and he would come over. We'd save it to whatever the shared drive was. And he would do a review, write down his notes, and then I would go in and make my adjustments. And then he ultimately would come in and sign it and send it off to the client.
Wow.
So
that was amazing. How did you get experience being out on site with properties?
That was, again, I'd gone out with the first appraiser that my mortgage buddy knew. So he had walked me around a few properties and showed me, correct ways of measuring. And then I really just kind of used my knowledge of the moving business. Keep in mind that moving furniture, I'm in and out of houses, hundreds of houses over, many years.
Oh, so, yeah, you've got more experience than most.
Yeah, so I knew properties. Taking what I had learned in my appraisal classes around measuring for square footage, both internally and externally, it wasn't a big leap, right? I knew houses pretty well. I knew how they were laid out. So that part of it was pretty easy for me.
Yes. No,
I will say the toughest part early on when I got into appraisal was not fully understanding how to compare things, how to really understand, this property versus this property. And I was doing a lot of appraisals in the city of Chicago, which is a lot of neighborhoods that are very similar properties, right? Bungalows, Midwest style bungalows. They're all pretty much the same, right?
Yes.
So what are the nuances that allow for, a $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 difference between these properties? And when I say $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000, we're talking on, at that time, $100,000 property. So it could be 10 to 30% difference in a sale price within only a few weeks or maybe a couple of months. So that was one of the challenges I really had to understand was, why were there such differences? What was really going on? And that's where I started really talking more with realtors, with other appraisers, the folks that I was around in the industry, and figuring out how to read the MLS, how to make the phone calls, how to dig into, what had been done on the property, so on and so forth. So it was that it just took time, it's time in the seat,
Yeah. Wow. That is amazing from that standpoint. And then you made reference to being early in at Fannie Mae and then realizing so much of what you learned really, well, there's a big gap between that level of performance and what you had come from. Share a little bit about that perspective.
Well, anytime you're an entrepreneur, you have making all the decisions, right? Everything. When you go to a corporate environment, you have a job to do, and your job is suddenly not in sales or in customer service or in all the other things that it takes to be an entrepreneur, to run your own small business. And it was both a challenge and exciting at the same time. I remember when I first got there and I came home on Saturday after my first or second week, and I didn't have anything to do on the weekend. Like, I had no other work because I had a job, and that was weird.
Yes.
It was nice because I had at that time about a 6 or 7 month old baby, and we got to spend a lot of family time together. But it was strange not being out doing appraisals on the weekend and, not sitting late afternoon or evenings writing appraisal reports to get them out and, retrieving faxes and taking phone calls and doing all this stuff that I was so used to doing. Suddenly I just had something different. And that different was a pile of appraisals that I had to review. In some cases, 10, 15, 20 in a day, where I had to go through them and review them. I got really good at reviewing appraisals, though. I will tell you that.
That's amazing. And how did you get good at it?
Time in the seat. But the difference now is that I was surrounded with really, really seasoned, good review appraisers. So when I ran across something, I had someone who was, only a few feet away that I could go talk to and ask questions and really dive deep. The other, I think, big difference that happened around that time was the availability of data, right? I was blessed in the fact that I came into the appraisal industry in Chicago, where we had an incredible MLS system early on. When I came in, it was already robust, had tons of information. There were requirements of realtors to input good data, accurate data.
Yeah.
So about the time I got to Fannie Mae, that's really when some of the other nationwide data services came out. And just being able to learn more about, gather more information and learn more about properties than, guessing. Because a lot of, I hate to say it, a lot of the stuff that we would do in certain situations is you're kind of guessing because you don't have the data, but you're going to move quickly, right? So we're trying to manage risk. And if the risk wasn't outside a certain, kind of realm, some assumptions, I should say, is not guessing so much, but, making some of those assumptions that were necessary. But as we got more information, as you start to work with people who have been around those situations before, unique properties that are on water, properties that have, certain encumbrances, so on and so forth, especially in an area where you might not be familiar. I grew up in an urban and suburban area. And if I had the task of reviewing at Fannie Mae internally a property that was in a rural area, I could go tap one of my colleagues and we could talk through it.
That's phenomenal. And then given that you had that type of, as you talked about, community of just some of the most talented people, how did you develop is the wrong word. How did they develop you to become as professional and proficient? Because obviously you showed up, and some people might argue that, he shows some talent, but he needs a little bit of development.
I would say that my first manager probably said exactly or pretty close to that when I first got there. I just kind of repeat, it's time in the seat and lots and lots and lots of reps. Literally hundreds and hundreds of appraisals and reviewing all sorts of different properties in different markets. And you start to get a sense of what's common between all of them, right?
Yes.
And how people in the market think about those properties and what's valuable to them. One of the things I had to kind of change in my thought process was taking the personal side out of it, right? It isn't so much what I think, right? What is a typical market buyer? What is a typical market participant going to think about this property, assume about this property? What are those bits? And after reviewing, so many hundreds of appraisals, you start to get a sense of the bell curve, as it were, what kind of sits in the middle, and then what are the outliers. And then you can start to look at the outliers and understand, okay, these are outliers. What, again, at Fannie Mae, we're managing risk. We're not doing a loan at that point, an REO. We're not doing a loan for a mortgage. We're trying to mitigate the risk of any more loss from an REO. So if a property comes in and it's on a unique, it's on unique land of some sort, we're trying to understand what the risk is of valuing it too low to get it out for resale. And that's where you start to talk to other folks. You start to learn. I know that market because I grew up not too far from there, or I have a colleague who is, and then you figure out you're not guessing anymore. And that's just, again, time in the seat, lots of reviews and being around other people who have that experience.
I think you make a great point. When I think about, like you mentioned that you helped with bringing into the world your first family member. Obviously, the help was a little limited at the beginning, but nonetheless important.
Yeah.
And you think back to that lovely little ball of baby, and took them a while to start to learn to crawl, and then they start to try and learn to walk. And we don't sit there and yell at them and scream at them for being stupid and ignorant because they can't walk after the first couple times. It is all about repetition. It's all about persistence. It's all about the experiential learning. And I really was connecting with what you were sharing in the development of your appraisal knowledge and appraisal skills. And curiously enough, that's what I heard not too long ago from one of our other podcast guests when he was explaining how they are training technology to help support people, is they're providing massive amounts of exposure, aka repetition, to build learning, to build awareness, to, in this case, create cognition. And so I appreciate what you're sharing and really connect some dots on that.
I've now been out of the appraisal business directly for, it's been close to 7-8 years now. And I still have a love affair with real estate. It's in your bones. It's kind of like diesel, it never quite leaves.
Got it.
But even at my time at Fannie Mae, I looked at, especially in the REO side, there were better ways. And listen, I love my appraisal brethren, and both of my brothers are appraisers. And there's a need for the valuation expertise, but there's also definitely a more efficient way of digging through data in order to get to manage risk. And now with the AI tools that we have available to us, being able to pour through all of that data, being able to teach those models is going to be an important part of the future of valuation. I'm excited for those folks who have the energy to really wrap their brains around it, to use it, because AI is only as good as, at least for now, and it's only as good as the people who are managing it and driving it. So human-centric AI is going to be the key to ultimately managing these risks across the mortgage industry, the valuation industry. And I just think about it as a tool that just wasn't available very long ago, and now you have access to it. Wow. I wish I would have had that, when I was, neck deep in the appraisal business. I would have been able to do so much more and find accuracy that, me as an individual crunching numbers from the MLS, I just wasn't able to do, or at least not do efficiently with a spreadsheet or even a napkin or whatever. I think there's huge opportunities coming down the pike, and it isn't the old days where, you go back. I was listening to one of your other podcasts, and you guys were talking about the 80s and even before, where everything was paper driven, and you made phone calls, and you got in the car and you went down to the county and you collected all that data, and suddenly you have your own database, right? And that database is valuable. Well, that was the buggy whip time. I mean, now our data is all everywhere at a moment's notice, and it comes from so many different places. The big ones, of course, I don't have to name the names, but they provide lots of data. But now it's how we use the data, not who owns it per se.
Yeah.
And if you're on the forefront of being able to use that as a cudgel, as a lever within your own purview, within your own business, you're going to be 1, 2, 10 steps ahead of your competition.
No, definitely appreciate that. What's fascinating, one other thing I really enjoyed is hearing about from where you started to how you progressed through getting an opportunity after working at Fannie Mae to go on and become a chief appraiser for an appraisal management company. What was that experience like? In the sense of you're not involved in producing of appraisals, but coordination of a lot of moving parts, of which appraisals are the moving parts.
So there's kind of a theme here, right? By the time I took that role as a chief appraiser, I had already been out of the production of appraisals for close to, again, 7, 8 years. When I went to Fannie Mae, I produced my last appraisal, I think a month or two after I was there. I wrote my last, single family appraisal. And then I turned basically into a review appraiser and a vendor manager, right? So that time really was the time I learned how to be ultimately a chief appraiser for an appraisal management company. I had reviewed at that point, thousands of appraisals. I had worked directly with hundreds or even thousands of appraisers throughout the country. I had worked also with banks and other folks. So it was kind of natural progression to be able to now go, okay, what do we need as this, this middle company to be able to communicate both to our vendors, the appraisers, and because each one of us at Fannie Mae, I would argue, in certain roles, acted somewhat as, chief appraisers, quote unquote.
Sure.
In the sense that we're managing those vendors and we're setting those expectations as the reviews come back, right? We're discussing with them best practices and what ultimately the end client at Fannie Mae's, in Fannie Mae's case, it was Fannie Mae as the end client. In an AMC, it's the bank or the mortgage company. So it wasn't a huge leap to come in to ultimately just take on that role. But it was fun, and it was a fun challenge. Got to again work with some great people, build a really cool team of quality analysts that did some really nice work.
I appreciate that. What did you learn being in a chief appraiser role that you never would have understood or had exposure to or awareness of if you'd not served in that role?
Well, I was lucky enough that the owner of the company was also owned a private equity firm. So he
Oh,
thought
really?
differently about running a company. And from day one, I was invited to be part of the board. I was
Oh, okay.
invited to see, really everything. As an executive of the company, I was able to see financials and see things from a different perspective than I had before. And that really opened my eyes to going, okay, this is, if I look at this not from an appraisal standpoint, but from a running and growing a business, there's a lot to learn here. Our CEO and COO were not in the real estate business at all. Right?
Oh, wow.
They had come from, our CEO was a former attorney, and he had come in to grow a business. And our COO was a data analytics genius and knew his way around data and crunching data and building models, and was not in the real estate business. So I was fortunate enough to, again, be around really smart people who had a different perspective. And in this case, growing a business. And what I brought to it was the expertise around the valuation space and appraisals and appraisal management, quality control, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's really informative, and what a great exposure that, wow, people just don't, where else are they going to get that opportunity?
Well, and that was the leap, because I'm looking at this opportunity as, okay, instead of growing my appraisal brain, because I had stepped away for a minute to go to HSBC to do something different, but it was still corporate-y, but I wasn't thinking about valuation or appraisals. So I came back into the role as a chief appraiser for a few years, and then had the opportunity to go to a company and be CFO and do all those things that I was, surrounded by: raising capital, growing a company, providing value for the investors, building teams, building systems. And those are the things that I do to this day for my clients on the small business side. And I love it. And each one of those pieces, each one of those stops along my journey got me to where I am today. All the way back to, moving furniture in high school and figuring out how tough it is to carry boxes out of a basement. For those of you in the South with no basement, it sucks. I will tell you that. But, all of those stops along the way give me my perspective on small business and how I can, and what I can bring to the table that is different than what, these business owners that I'm working with, how they see things and how we can make things better, really build more solid foundations for businesses by looking at it from different perspectives.
Man, that's phenomenal. Darren, I really appreciate it, buddy. This is a great insight that, if we didn't have this opportunity, it would just be like a road sign on a road trip. It'd just be in the rearview mirror.
Indeed, man. This is great. I don't often get a chance to go deep and talk about some of the cool stuff and the cool people I've worked with, but it's fun to recall.
I appreciate it. And wrapping up, given everything you've seen and heard and experienced, what's something you're looking forward to or optimistic about over the next 3 to 5 years?
There's a lot of stuff. Information and AI. I'm really excited about what the opportunities will be. I don't know what they are. I don't think any of us do. Mm-hmm. AI as a buzzword is kind of blown out and annoying at this point. But the reality is, when people talk about AI today, it's mostly ChatGPT and using it like, kind of like Google. The reality of AI is that there's tons of models. There's tons of different models that do different things. And AI has been around for a long time. We are now just really harnessing it to be able to do things better. And I don't know fully what the future holds, but I think the folks who are able to get involved with it, understand the human side of it and how important that human element is around AI, they're going to be successful.
Got it.
In the coming years.
Yeah, totally get that. Man, that's amazing. I really appreciate it. And may we be blessed with longevity to live the future that'll soon be history.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, my goodness. Well, friends, in the spirit of generosity, as Darren has done for us in sharing a little walk back memory road, memory lane, as they would say, please do the same and don't forget, or in this case, kindly remember to not only subscribe, but like this episode so Darren feels even better. And, we can continue to spread the great word of the many possibilities, because you too might only be moving furniture right now, but one day in the future, you might be, moving people's lives through valuation. Who knows what's possible? Darren, thanks again for joining us.
Michael, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, buddy. Until next time, my friends.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Appraisals, Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Appraisals, Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.